Justice bends easily when power sits high on the bench. Judge Harold Whitaker believed his gavel could bury truth forever, shielding the racist cops he coddled while silencing those who dared to resist. To him, Camille Rhodes was forgettable, a weary black attorney clinging to scraps of hope, a woman too cautious to challenge his fortress of privilege. But Whitaker misread her silence, mistaking restraint for weakness. Behind Camille's calm eyes burned decades of battles against systemic injustice, a lifetime of learning how corruption hides in plain sight. His smug dismissal of evidence wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of his fall. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Judge Whitaker's courtroom. Camille Rhodes sat perfectly still in the third row, her dark suit crisp and unwrinkled despite the summer heat. Her notebook lay open on her lap, pen poised as she watched Darnell Green on the witness stand. The young man's voice trembled slightly, but his words rang clear through the packed room. "They didn't even tell me why they pulled me over," Darnell said, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Officer Matthews yanked my door open before I could get my license out. Then Officer Briggs grabbed my arm and—" He swallowed hard, his eyes growing wet. "They dragged me out and threw me down on the street." Camille's pen moved steadily across her page, but her eyes never left Darnell. She noticed how his shoulders hunched forward, how his gaze dropped to his hands when describing the worst parts. Classic signs of trauma, just like she'd seen hundreds of times before. In the front row, Darnell's mother, Patricia Green, pressed a tissue to her lips. The community members filling the benches behind her leaned forward, their faces tight with worry and hope. Some nodded as Darnell spoke, others whispered quiet prayers. "Officer Matthews kept his knee on my back," Darnell continued, his voice growing hoarse. "I couldn't breathe right. I told them I wasn't resisting, but Officer Briggs just laughed and said, 'Sure you're not, boy.' Then the hits started coming. Judge Whitaker shifted in his high-backed chair, his expression unreadable beneath heavy brows. His fingers drummed slowly on his desk as Darnell described each blow, each taunt, each moment of terror on that dark street. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 witnesses had confirmed Darnell's account. Security footage from a nearby store, though grainy, clearly showed the officer's aggression. Even the officer's own body cameras, though they'd accidentally turned them on late, caught Matthews bragging afterward about teaching another one a lesson. When Darnell finished his testimony, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Camille watched Judge Whitaker closely, noting how he straightened his robes with deliberate slowness. She'd seen that gesture before. A power move, making everyone wait on him. The judge cleared his throat. Having heard all testimony and reviewed the evidence presented, this court must now render its decision. He paused, his pale eyes sweeping the gallery. The burden of proof in criminal matters is substantial, as it should be. Law enforcement officers must be free to perform their duties without fear of unwarranted prosecution. Camille's grip tightened on her pen. She knew what was coming, had seen it too many times before. She could feel the tension rising in the room like a pressure cooker about to blow. "While the incident described here today is unfortunate," Whitaker continued, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, "I find the evidence insufficient to support criminal charges against Officers Matthews and Briggs. The testimony presented lacks the certainty required for conviction, and the video evidence is—" He waved his hand dismissively. "Inconclusive at best." A collective gasp rose from the gallery. Officer Matthews, sitting at the defense table, smirked openly. Beside him, Officer Briggs maintained a more neutral expression, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Therefore, Whitaker declared, raising his voice over the growing murmur of the crowd, I hereby dismiss all charges against the defendants. Officers Matthews and Briggs are free to return to active duty. The gallery erupted. Shouts of "No!" and "This isn't right!" filled the air. Patricia Green's wail of despair cut through the chaos like a knife. My baby! They hurt my baby and get to walk free? Camille remained seated, her body rigid with controlled fury. She watched as Darnell slumped in the witness chair, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. The boy, because that's what he was, really, just 19 years old, looked utterly defeated. The bailiffs moved through the rows, urging people toward the exits. Some left quietly, shaking their heads in disgust. Others continued to shout, their voices raw with anger and pain. A local pastor tried to lead a prayer for peace, his words nearly lost in the commotion. Matthews and Briggs stood, shaking hands with their attorney. Matthews caught Camille's eye and winked, his face split in a triumphant grin. Briggs at least had the sense to look away, though his shoulders squared with obvious relief. Judge Whitaker raised his gavel, bringing it down with 3 sharp cracks. Order! I will have order in this court! His voice boomed over the chaos. Clear the courtroom immediately, or I will hold people in contempt. Camille watched it all, her dark eyes taking in every detail, every reaction. Her jaw clenched tight enough to ache, but her face remained carefully composed. She could feel the weight of generational injustice pressing down on her shoulders, hear the echoes of her parents' voices telling her to stay strong, to keep fighting. Slowly, deliberately, she closed her notebook. The testimony, the evidence, the signs of Whitaker's bias, she had documented it all. Her fingers pressed into the leather cover as she rose from her seat, standing tall despite the suffocating weight of another justice denied. Around her, the community's pain was palpable. Some were crying, others arguing with the bailiffs. Patricia Green had collapsed into her sister's arms, her body shaking with sobs. But Camille stood perfectly still, a pillar of quiet determination in the storm of despair and anger. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun beat down on the crowd gathering on the wide stone steps. Signs waved in the air, some hastily made with marker on cardboard, others worn and familiar from too many similar protests. The chant grew louder with each repetition, "No justice, no peace." Camille stood at the top of the steps, her leather briefcase heavy in her hand. Sweat trickled down her back beneath her suit jacket, but she didn't move to wipe it away. Her focus remained sharp, taking in every detail of the scene unfolding before her. Reporters swarmed around her like hungry moths to a flame. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. She recognized most of them, the local news crews who covered every case like this one, who'd seen justice fail time and time again. Ms. Rhodes! What's your response to Judge Whitaker's decision? A young reporter from Channel 7 pushed to the front, her red hair blazing in the sunlight. Camille took a measured breath before speaking. Her voice carried clearly over the crowd's chants, each word carefully chosen. Today, we witnessed a gross miscarriage of justice. The evidence against Officers Matthews and Briggs was clear and convincing. Judge Whitaker's decision to dismiss these charges shows a disturbing pattern of protecting officers who abuse their power. More questions flew at her. What about the video evidence? Will there be an appeal? Do you think race played a factor in the judge's decision? She held up one hand, commanding silence with the simple gesture. The security footage clearly showed excessive force. 3 witnesses corroborated Mr. Green's testimony. Even the officer's own body camera footage, though conveniently incomplete, contained damaging statements. Judge Whitaker's claim that this evidence was insufficient is, frankly, an insult to this community's intelligence. The courthouse doors opened behind her, and Camille turned to see Judge Whitaker emerging. He moved with unhurried confidence, his black robes flowing around him as he descended the steps. The crowd's chants grew louder, angrier, but he acted as if he couldn't hear them at all. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Whitaker's lips curved in a slight smile as he watched Officers Matthews and Briggs emerge from the courthouse, surrounded by supporters wearing thin blue line patches. Matthews was laughing, clapping hands with fellow officers who'd come to show support. Briggs maintained his more reserved demeanor, but his relief was obvious in the way his shoulders relaxed as he shook hands with well-wishers. "Ms. Rhodes," another reporter called out, "will you be filing any further motions in this case?" Camille's eyes narrowed as she watched Whitaker slide into the sedan's back seat. "We are exploring all legal options," she said firmly. "This community deserves better than a justice system that turns a blind eye to police brutality. We will not stop fighting until there is real accountability." Patricia Green pushed through the crowd then, her face still wet with tears. "Ms. Rhodes," she said, gripping Camille's arm, "please, you have to help us. They can't just get away with this." Camille turned away from the reporters, placing her hand over Patricia's. "I promise you," she said softly, "this isn't over. We're going to keep fighting for Darnell." The black sedan pulled away from the curb, and Camille watched it disappear around the corner. Officers Matthews and Briggs were still holding court at the bottom of the steps, now joined by their police union representative, who was giving his own statement to the press about vindication and support for our officers. Camille checked her watch, noting the time. She needed to document everything while it was fresh in her mind. Every word Whitaker had said, every reaction, every detail that might matter later. The weight of her notebook in her briefcase seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Making her way through the crowd, she nodded to familiar faces, community leaders, local activists, church members who'd come to support the Green family. Their eyes held the same mix of anger and determination she felt in her own heart. This wasn't just about one case anymore. It was about a pattern, a system that needed to change. The parking lot was quieter, the sounds of the protest muffled by distance and the rows of cars. Camille's sensible black sedan waited in the shade of an old oak tree. As she reached for her keys, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen lit up with a text from Jordan Price, her paralegal. "We need to talk. I found something." Camille stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the phone. Behind her, she could still hear the chants from the courthouse steps, still feel the heat of the sun and the weight of another unjust verdict. But something in Jordan's message made her pulse quicken. He wasn't one for dramatic statements or false alarms. She glanced back at the courthouse, its imposing columns stark against the blue sky. Matthews and Briggs were finally leaving, climbing into their respective vehicles with their supporters. The crowd was starting to disperse, though some remained, their signs still held high in defiance. The phone felt heavy in her hand as she read Jordan's message again. In the distance, a news helicopter circled the courthouse, its blades chopping through the humid air. Another day, another denial of justice. But maybe, just maybe, Jordan had found something that could change that. The evening cast long shadows through the windows of Camille's law office as she unlocked the door. The small suite on the third floor of the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard building wasn't fancy, but it was home to countless late nights, fighting for justice. Tonight would be another one. Jordan was already inside, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. Papers covered every surface of the conference room table, and his laptop cast a blue glow across his focused face. He looked up when Camille entered, his eyes bright with urgency. "Close the door," he said, his voice low despite them being alone. Camille set down her briefcase and did as he asked. What's so important? It couldn't wait until morning. Instead of answering, Jordan went to the windows and drew the blinds. The streetlights outside created thin lines of light across the floor through the slats. He returned to his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I've been digging through the court records, he said, going back through everything filed in the green case. But I wasn't just looking at what was filed, I was looking for what wasn't there. Camille took off her suit jacket and draped it over a chair. The air conditioning hummed softly, barely cutting through the humid evening air. What do you mean? Jordan turned his laptop around. Look at this filing index. Notice anything strange about the numbering? She leaned in, scanning the document numbers. After 20 years of practice, she could read court filings like most people read morning papers. Her eyes caught on a gap in the sequence. There's a skip between Exhibits 23 and 25. Exactly. Jordan pulled out a manila envelope from under one of the stacks of papers. It took some creative talking, but I convinced one of the clerk's assistants to let me look at the original filing boxes. This was buried at the bottom, misfiled under a different case number. Camille's heart began to beat faster as she opened the envelope. Inside was a DVD marked simply Exhibit 24 and a cover sheet with Judge Whitaker's signature ordering it sealed and struck from the record. How did you get this? She asked, holding up the disc. Jordan's face showed a mix of pride and nervousness. Let's just say I have a friend in the IT department who owed me a favor. The important thing is what's on it. He took the DVD and inserted it into his laptop. The video player opened, showing a timestamp from the night of Darnell's arrest. The footage was from a police dash cam, its infrared night vision giving everything a ghostly green tint. Camille pulled her chair closer as Jordan pressed play. The scene showed Darnell already in handcuffs, complying with orders, when officers Matthews and Briggs dragged him out of view of their body cameras. But they'd forgotten about the dash cam of the backup unit that had just arrived. The footage was crystal clear. Darnell, restrained and helpless, being thrown to the ground. The officer's boots connecting with his ribs, his back, his head. Their laughing voices caught by the camera's microphone. Not so tough now, are you, boy? Camille's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The beating lasted 47 seconds. She'd watched thousands of hours of evidence videos over her career, but this one made her stomach turn. There's more, Jordan said quietly. He minimized the video and opened another document. This is Whitaker's order to suppress the footage. Look at the reason he gave. She read aloud from the page. Evidence excluded due to chain of custody concerns and technical malfunction rendering footage unreliable. Her voice dripped with disgust. Technical malfunction? The video is perfect quality, and the chain of custody documentation is right here, completely intact. He buried it, Jordan said. Deliberately buried evidence that would have guaranteed a conviction. That's not judicial discretion. That's corruption. Camille stood up and began to pace, her mind racing. The carpet muffled her footsteps as she moved back and forth, processing the implications. This isn't just about protecting those officers. Whitaker put his name on a false order. He actively concealed evidence in a criminal case. Which is why I wanted you to see this tonight, Jordan said. The clerk's assistant who helped me, she's new. Doesn't know all the political connections yet. Once word gets out that someone accessed these files, they'll close ranks, Camille finished. She stopped pacing and leaned against the window, peering through the blinds at the city lights below. Make copies of everything. Multiple copies. Store them in different places. Jordan was already ahead of her, his external hard drive humming as it backed up the files. What's our next move? Camille turned back to the room, her expression shifting from anger to calculated determination. She pulled her chair close to the table again and picked up a legal pad. We have to be smart about this. Whitaker has friends everywhere. The police department, the DA's office, City Hall. If he gets wind that we have this evidence before we can use it properly, it'll disappear for good this time, Jordan nodded. Or worse, Camille added softly, remembering other cases where evidence had mysteriously vanished, along with the people who discovered it. She began writing, her pen moving quickly across the yellow paper. The office was quiet, except for the sound of Jordan's typing and the occasional car passing on the street below. The air felt charged with possibility and danger. After several minutes, Camille set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she looked at the footage frozen on Jordan's screen. "We've got him," she whispered, then pulled the legal pad closer. "Now, let's figure out how to use this without tipping our hand." The next morning dawned bright and humid, typical for Birmingham in late summer. Camille stood at the podium she'd set up outside her office building, her crisp navy suit a stark contrast to the weathered brick behind her. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. "Yesterday, we witnessed a miscarriage of justice in Judge Whitaker's courtroom," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today, I'm here to tell you that this dismissal was not just wrong. It was corrupt." Camera shutters clicked rapidly as reporters leaned forward, sensing a bigger story than they'd expected. Camille gripped the edges of the podium, her fingers pressing against the wood. "I have evidence that crucial video footage showing Officers Matthews and Briggs assaulting Darnell Green was deliberately suppressed. Judge Whitaker personally ordered this evidence sealed and hidden from the jury." The crowd erupted with questions, microphones thrust toward her face. Camille raised a hand, maintaining control of the moment. This wasn't a simple oversight or a procedural decision. This was a calculated attempt to protect violent officers and deny justice to a young man who did nothing wrong except drive while black in Birmingham. She noticed familiar faces in the crowd, community leaders, activists, and some of her former clients. Mrs. Green, Darnell's mother, stood near the front, tears streaming down her face, but her head held high. "I will be filing formal complaints with the State Judicial Ethics Committee and requesting a federal investigation into Judge Whitaker's pattern of protecting police misconduct. This stops now." A reporter from Channel 5 pushed forward. "Ms. Rhodes, do you have proof of these allegations?" "I have documentation of Judge Whitaker's order to suppress the evidence, along with the chain of custody records proving the footage was valid and properly obtained. I also have witness statements from courthouse staff confirming these documents were deliberately misfiled to hide them." Another reporter called out, "Aren't you worried about retaliation from Judge Whitaker or his supporters?" Camille's spine straightened even more. "I've spent my entire career fighting for justice in this city. I've faced threats before. But I will not be intimidated into silence while our community suffers." The crowd behind the reporters began to grow as word spread. People from nearby businesses came out to listen. Some held up their phones, streaming the conference live on social media. "To Judge Whitaker and anyone else who thinks they can abuse their power without consequences," Camille continued, her voice carrying across the growing crowd, "know this. We are watching. We are documenting. And we will not stop until there is real accountability." The questions came rapid fire after that. Camille handled each one with the precision of a surgeon, careful not to reveal too much about her evidence, while making it clear she held solid proof. As the conference wound down, supporters in the crowd began chanting, "No justice, no peace." By early afternoon, local news stations were running the story on repeat. Social media exploded with clips from the press conference, and Judge Whitaker corruption started trending in Alabama. Judge Whitaker's response came just before the evening news. His office released a terse statement that Camille read on her phone while sitting in traffic. The allegations made by Attorney Rhodes are completely false and potentially defamatory. All decisions in the Green case were made based on proper judicial procedure and existing law. Any suggestion of impropriety is merely an attempt to inflame public sentiment and undermine the judicial process. But the damage was done. The carefully worded statement couldn't hide Whitaker's fury, especially when Channel 5 caught him leaving the courthouse. The footage showed him snapping at reporters, his face red, yanking his arm away from a photographer who got too close. That evening, Camille sat across from her daughter Maya at their favorite Thai restaurant. The 16-year-old had insisted on celebrating, calling it her mother's superhero moment. "Did you see how mad he looked on TV?" Maya said, stirring her pad thai. "I thought his head was going to explode." Camille smiled, watching her daughter's animated face. Maya had her father's height and artistic talent, but people said she had Camille's fire. "It's not about making him mad, baby. It's about making him face consequences." "I know," Maya nodded, suddenly serious. "Some kids at school were talking about it. Darnell's little sister is in my chemistry class. She said her whole family was crying when they watched your speech." She reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm really proud of you, Mom." The simple words hit Camille harder than any press conference could. She squeezed back, thinking about how Maya had grown up watching her fight these battles, wondering sometimes if it was fair to expose her daughter to such harsh realities. "Thank you, baby. That means everything to me." They were sharing a plate of mango sticky rice when Camille's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but years of handling emergency calls from clients made her check anyway. The message was short. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Camille set the phone face down on the table, not wanting Maya to see her expression change. Outside the restaurant's windows, the Birmingham streets were growing dark, but she could still see people walking past, living their lives, trusting that justice was possible. She watched her daughter laugh at something on her own phone, innocent and hopeful. The threat sat like ice in her stomach, but she forced herself to take another bite of dessert. She'd known this was coming. The question was, what would they try first? The next morning's sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when Camille's phone started buzzing with news alerts. She reached for it groggily, but sleep vanished the instant she saw the headlines. Civil rights, attorney accused of witness tampering in previous cases. Sources claim Rhodes fabricated evidence in police brutality suits. Ethical concerns raised about attorney challenging Judge Whitaker. Her hands trembled as she opened the first article. Anonymous sources claimed she had pressured witnesses to change their testimony in 3 previous cases. Another story suggested she had mishandled client funds. A complete lie that could destroy her career if people believed it. The doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the bedroom window, she saw news vans parked along her quiet suburban street. Reporters huddled on her front lawn like vultures, microphones and cameras ready. Her phone buzzed again. "Jordan," her paralegal. "Have you seen the news?" Jordan's voice was tight with worry. "I'm looking at it right now." Camille moved away from the window. "They're trying to discredit me before we can file the complaints." These stories are everywhere. The Birmingham Herald, Channel 5, even the national outlets are picking them up. They're saying a former employee provided documentation. Camille's mind raced through her staff history. "We both know that's impossible. I've only had 3 employees in 10 years, and you're the only one still in Birmingham." "It has to be fabricated," Jordan agreed. "But, Camille, there's more." The Bar Association called. They're opening an inquiry based on these allegations. The words hit like a physical blow. An inquiry could lead to suspension or disbarment, even if the claims were false. They knew exactly where to hit her. "They're not just trying to discredit me," Camille said. "They're trying to stop me from practicing law." The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Camille peered through the curtains. More reporters had arrived, and camera flashes lit up her front yard like lightning. She got dressed quickly, choosing her most professional suit, armor for the battle ahead. As she applied her makeup, a police cruiser rolled slowly past her house. Officer Briggs sat behind the wheel, making no attempt to hide his smirk. Maya appeared in the bathroom doorway, already dressed for school. "Mom? Why are there reporters outside?" Camille set down her mascara, turning to face her daughter. "Some people are trying to hurt my reputation because of the case I'm working on. They're telling lies about me. But you have proof they're lying, right?" Maya's voice held a trace of fear. "You can show everyone the truth? I'm going to fight this, baby. But I need you to be strong. Things might get rough for a while." Maya's chin lifted, that familiar Rhodes determination. "I'm not scared of them." But Camille was scared for her. She hugged her daughter tight, then called Maya's school to arrange for her to be picked up by a trusted friend's parent. No way was she letting Maya walk home with police cars prowling the neighborhood. Camille's phone kept buzzing with calls from other attorneys, clients, and reporters. She answered only the important ones, assuring worried clients that their cases were safe, their money secure in properly managed trust accounts. By noon, the story had evolved. Now they claimed she had connections to radical activist groups and had encouraged riots after previous trials. The implications were clear. They were painting her as a dangerous agitator, not a respected attorney. She sat in her home office, documenting every false claim, every piece of evidence she had to refute them. A shadow passed her window. Another police cruiser, moving slower than a funeral procession. Her phone lit up with a text from Mrs. Green. "We know the truth. The community stands with you." Similar messages poured in from other clients, local pastors, and community leaders. But for every supportive message, there were 3 more news alerts about fresh allegations. Evening brought no relief. The reporters finally left her lawn, but police cars continued their slow parade past her house. Red and blue lights flashed through her windows every 15 minutes, like clockwork. They weren't even trying to be subtle about the intimidation. Camille stood at her kitchen window, watching another cruiser pass. The pattern was clear now. This wasn't just about protecting 2 violent officers or 1 corrupt judge. This was the system revealing itself. The interconnected web of power that maintained control through intimidation, character assassination, and the thin blue line that circled her house like sharks. She thought about the dash-cam video of Darnell Green's beating, about Judge Whitaker's smugly worded orders, about the years of cases where justice had been denied. How many other attorneys had faced this kind of pressure and backed down? How many victims had been silenced by this same machinery of intimidation? The flash of red and blue lights painted her kitchen walls again. Camille gripped the counter, her knuckles white. They had escalated this beyond a simple case of police brutality. They had made it about power itself. Who had it, who didn't, and what happened to people who challenged the status quo. Another police car rolled past, its lights pulsing through her windows. The message was clear. They were watching, waiting, ready to pounce on any mistake. But they had miscalculated. They thought this show of force would make her back down. Instead, it only proved how desperately the system needed to be dismantled. The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Camille's law office as she spread financial documents across the conference table. Her eyes were tired from a sleepless night, but her mind stayed sharp, focused on the task ahead. Jordan sat to her right, his laptop open and fingers flying across the keyboard. Renee Carter paced the room, her energy filling the space with determined intensity. "These smear campaigns are straight from their playbook," Renee said, stopping to lean over the table. "They did the same thing to Marcus Thompson last year when he tried to expose corruption in the housing authority. Beat him down with lies until he gave up. Camille nodded, sorting through another stack of papers. But they picked the wrong target this time. Every lie they tell just proves we're getting close to something they want to hide. Jordan looked up from his screen. I've been digging through public records all morning. Judge Whitaker's financial disclosures are interesting. There are some gaps that don't add up. Show me, Camille said, moving to look over his shoulder. Jordan pulled up several spreadsheets. See these quarterly payments? They're listed as consulting fees from a company called Blue Shield Advisory Group. I did some digging. It's a shell corporation owned by the police union. Renee stopped pacing. How much money are we talking about? $20,000 every 3 months, Jordan said, going back at least 5 years. That's not consulting, Camille said, her voice hard. That's a payoff. She grabbed a legal pad and started making notes. The payment dates lined up perfectly with several high-profile cases where Whitaker had ruled in favor of police officers accused of misconduct. Jordan, can you pull the case records for every police brutality suit that came before Whitaker during this period? Already on it. Jordan's fingers flew across the keyboard. In the last 5 years, Whitaker has presided over 27 cases involving police misconduct. He dismissed 23 before trial. The other 4 ended in acquittals. Renee slammed her hand on the table. Not a single conviction in 5 years. With all the video evidence, all the witnesses, all the broken bones and grieving families, not one conviction. Because it was never about justice, Camille said. It was about maintaining the system. Whitaker's been their cleanup man, making messy cases disappear. And they've been paying him well for the service. She walked to the window, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk below. The smear campaign suddenly made more sense. They weren't just trying to discredit her, they were protecting their investment in Whitaker. We need those bank records, Camille said, turning back to the room. The complete transaction history between Blue Shield Advisory and Whitaker's accounts. Jordan frowned. That's going to be tough. We'll need subpoenas, and after yesterday's media blast, any judge in Birmingham will be hesitant to sign them. Then we'll file in federal court, Camille said. I still have friends there who believe in the law more than they believe in protecting corrupt judges. Renee pulled out her phone. I'll start mobilizing people for tomorrow. Nothing makes judges nervous like a crowd of witnesses. Be careful, Camille warned. They're watching all of us now. Any excuse to claim we're inciting violence. Please, Renee cut her off with a wave. I've been organizing peaceful protests since before these cops were born. They want to paint us as dangerous radicals? We'll show up in our Sunday best, singing hymns on the courthouse steps. Let them try to spin that. Jordan's computer pinged. Got something else. 3 months ago, Blue Shield Advisory Group made a one-time payment of $50,000 to another shell company. Guess who owns it? Whitaker? Camille asked. No, Officer Cole Matthews, one of the cops who beat Darnell Green. The room went quiet as the implications sank in. Camille felt the pieces clicking together. The dismissed charges, the buried evidence, the coordinated attacks on her reputation. It wasn't just corruption. It was a well-oiled machine. That's our angle, she said finally. We can prove Whitaker had a direct financial connection to one of the defendants in a case he was judging. That's not just unethical, it's criminal. She spent the next few hours drafting subpoena requests while Jordan dug deeper into the financial web and Renee made calls to community leaders. The sun had set by the time they finished, casting long shadows across the office. Get some rest, Camille told them both. Tomorrow, we start filing papers, and they're going to fight us every step of the way. After they left, Camille stayed to organize the documents they'd need for morning. She carefully sorted everything into folders, making copies and storing them in separate locations. They'd already shown they were willing to play dirty. She wasn't taking any chances with the evidence. The street was quiet when she finally left the office. She double-checked the locks, then walked to her car, keys gripped tightly in her hand. The streetlights cast pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalk, but the shadows between them seemed darker than usual. Movement caught her eye. A figure across the street, partially hidden behind a parked van. The quick flash of a camera lens reflected in the streetlight. Camille kept walking, her pace steady, her face neutral. Let them take their pictures. Let them think they were intimidating her. Every photo they snapped just proved how desperate they were getting. She reached her car and unlocked it, feeling the invisible lens still trained on her. They wanted her to look scared, to slip up, to give them something they could use against her. Instead, she got in her car with the same calm dignity she showed in court. The figure across the street kept shooting photos as she drove away. But Camille didn't look back. She had stopped being afraid of shadows when she realized what they were hiding from the light. 2 days after discovering the financial connections, Camille arrived at her office early, hoping to get ahead of the mounting paperwork. The morning light barely filtered through the windows when she noticed something unusual. A manila envelope on the floor, clearly slipped under her door overnight. Her heart raced as she picked it up. No return address, no markings, just her name written in careful block letters. She pulled on a pair of latex gloves from her desk drawer before opening it, mindful of preserving any evidence. Inside, she found court transcripts from Darnell Green's case. But these weren't the official versions. These pages had handwritten notes in the margins, showing detailed changes between the original testimony and what appeared in the final record. Entire sections of witness statements had been altered or removed completely. "My God," Camille whispered, spreading the papers across her desk. The changes were strategic and damning. Where a witness had described Officer Matthews striking Darnell repeatedly with his baton while the victim was already subdued, the official transcript read, "Using necessary force to restrain an aggressive suspect." Where another witness mentioned racial slurs being used, the transcript showed no such testimony. But most shocking were the initials HW next to each change, along with dates and times. Judge Harold Whitaker had personally supervised these alterations. Camille's hands shook as she read through page after page. At the bottom of the last document was a handwritten note. "Meet me at Carter's Cafe, 2 p.m. today. Come alone. Alicia Monroe." Camille recognized the name. Alicia was a senior clerk in Whitaker's office, someone who'd worked there for over 15 years. She'd always seemed nervous during their brief interactions, eyes downcast, speaking in whispers. The hours until 2 o'clock crawled by. Camille made copies of everything, securing them in different locations. She called Jordan and told him she'd be out of the office for the afternoon, then drove to Carter's Cafe 15 minutes early. The cafe sat on a quiet street away from downtown, its faded awning and mismatched chairs suggesting a place where people came to be overlooked. Camille chose a table near the back, positioning herself to see both the entrance and the emergency exit. At exactly 2, Alicia Monroe walked in. She was a thin woman in her 50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her hands clutched her purse like a shield as she made her way to Camille's table. "Thank you for meeting me," Alicia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't taken off her coat, despite the warmth inside. "Thank you for the documents," Camille replied, keeping her own voice low. "You're taking an enormous risk." Alicia's eyes darted around the cafe. "You don't know the half of it. What I sent you, that's just from one case. Whitaker's been doing this for years." A waitress approached, and both women fell silent until she'd taken their order and left. "Tell me everything," Camille said. "It started small," Alicia explained, her fingers nervously shredding a paper napkin. "A word changed here, a sentence removed there. Always in cases involving police officers. Then it got bigger. Whole passages of testimony disappeared. Evidence marked as inadmissible for reasons that made no sense. And you witnessed this personally? Alicia nodded. I'm the one he made type up the altered versions. Said it had to be me because he trusted me. Really, it was because I was too scared to say no. What changed? Camille asked. Why come forward now? Darnell Green's case. Alicia's voice cracked. The dashcam video. I saw it before Whitaker sealed it. That boy could have died. And those officers, they were laughing about it later in the hallway. Laughing. She wiped her eyes. I have grandchildren Darnell's age. I couldn't sleep after that. Camille reached across the table, covering Alicia's trembling hand with her own. We can protect you. There are witness protection programs. No programs, Alicia cut in. I know too much about how the system works, about who's involved. The only protection I have is making sure this evidence gets out. She pulled a USB drive from her purse. Everything's here. Years of altered transcripts, emails between Whitaker and the police union, recordings from his chambers I made secretly. Use it. Alicia, Camille said firmly, gripping the woman's hand. At least let me get you somewhere safe tonight. A hotel, under a different name. The older woman shook her head. I have to go back to work. Act normal. The minute they suspect I'm the leak. She stood up suddenly. I've been here too long already. Wait, Camille said, standing too. How can I contact you if... You can't. Just promise me you'll make it count. Make them answer for what they've done. Camille took Alicia's trembling hand in both of hers, squeezing it gently. I promise. And when this breaks open, I'll make sure everyone knows how brave you were. Alicia gave a shaky smile, then hurried toward the door, her coat pulled tight around her. Camille watched her go, the USB drive heavy in her pocket. She didn't notice the man in the leather jacket in the corner booth, his coffee untouched as his eyes followed Alicia's retreat. The next morning, Camille sat in the green room of the National Morning Report, her hands steady as she reviewed her notes one final time. The show's producer, a young woman with a clipboard and an earpiece, poked her head in. 5 minutes, Ms. Rhodes. Camille nodded, smoothing her blazer. The documents were arranged perfectly in her leather portfolio. Copies of the altered transcripts, financial records, everything except the USB drive, which remained secured in her office safe. Under the bright studio lights, host Patricia Chen leaned forward in her chair. Our next guest has uncovered what she claims is systematic corruption in the Alabama justice system. Civil rights attorney Camille Rhodes, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, Patricia. You've brought some disturbing evidence regarding Judge Harold Whitaker. Can you walk us through what you've discovered? Camille opened her portfolio. These documents show a pattern of judicial misconduct spanning years. Judge Whitaker has been systematically altering court transcripts to protect police officers accused of brutality. She held up the first page, which the camera zoomed in on. Here you can see his own handwritten notes, directing specific changes to witness testimony. Words like assault changed to necessary force. Mentions of racial slurs completely removed. Patricia's eyes widened as she examined the documents. And you can verify these are authentic? Absolutely. We have the original transcripts, the altered versions, and proof of Judge Whitaker's direct involvement. This isn't a single incident. It's a years-long conspiracy to cover up police misconduct. The interview continued for 15 minutes, with Camille methodically laying out the evidence. By the time she finished, Patricia Chen looked stunned. This is extraordinary, the host said. What happens next? We're filing federal civil rights charges, Camille replied. No one is above the law, not corrupt officers, and certainly not corrupt judges. Back home in Birmingham, the response was immediate. Her phone started ringing before she even left the studio. By afternoon, hundreds had gathered outside the courthouse, carrying signs reading, "Justice for Darnell" and "Hold Whitaker Accountable." Renee Carter, the community activist, called with news that their legal defense fund had received over $50,000 in donations since the broadcast. People are fired up, Camille. They're ready to fight. That evening, Camille sat with Maya at their kitchen table, case files spread between plates of half-eaten pizza. Her daughter held up a yellow legal pad covered in her neat handwriting. "Okay, Mom," Maya said. "Hit me with your opening argument again." Camille stood, smoothing her shirt like she would her courtroom suit. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust. When we step into a courtroom, we trust that justice will be blind, that the facts will matter more than the color of someone's skin or the badge they wear." Maya held up her hand. "Wait. Lead with the corruption angle. That's what will grab them." "You think?" "Definitely. Start with Judge Whitaker's betrayal of public trust. Then connect it to Darnell's case." Camille smiled, warmth filling her chest. At 16, Maya already showed the sharp legal mind that Camille had at twice her age. "When did you get so smart about trial strategy?" "Must be in my genes," Maya grinned. "Plus, I've been watching you my whole life. I know how you build a case." They worked for another hour, refining arguments and organizing evidence. For the first time since this fight began, Camille felt truly hopeful. The truth was finally coming out. Justice felt possible. "We should celebrate," Maya said, gathering empty pizza boxes. "Ice cream? At this hour?" "Mom, we're winning. That deserves ice cream." Camille laughed. "Can't argue with that logic. But just a small bowl. We both have early mornings tomorrow." They were scraping the bottom of a pint of butter pecan when Camille's phone buzzed. A text from Jordan. "Call me ASAP." "Everything okay?" Maya asked, noting her mother's frown. "Probably just case details. I'll call from my study." Camille kissed Maya's forehead. "Thanks for your help tonight, baby." In her study, Camille dialed Jordan's number. He answered on the first ring. "Camille." His voice was tight, strained. "Turn on Channel 8 News." She found the remote, clicked on the TV mounted on her study wall. The screen showed police cars and crime scene tape outside a small house. The ticker at the bottom read, "Breaking. Court clerk found dead in apparent suicide." The phone nearly slipped from Camille's grasp. The reporter's voice seemed to come from very far away. Alicia Monroe, a 15-year veteran clerk of the state court, was discovered in her home this morning. "Camille?" Jordan's voice crackled through the phone. "Are you there?" Her hands began to shake violently. The remote clattered to her desk. This isn't possible. I just saw her yesterday. She was afraid. But she wasn't. Police are saying she left a note, claiming stress and depression." The phone slipped from Camille's numb fingers, hitting the carpet with a soft thud. On the screen, police were wheeling out a body bag. Behind the crime scene tape, she caught a glimpse of a man in a leather jacket, watching the proceedings with cold eyes. The call disconnected when her phone hit the floor, but Camille barely noticed. Her mind raced with memories of Alicia's trembling hands in the cafe just yesterday, the way she'd whispered, "They'll do anything to protect their own." Maya's soft knock startled her. "Mom, you okay?" "I'm fine, baby." Camille quickly switched off the TV. "Just work stuff. You should get to bed. School tomorrow." After Maya retreated, Camille grabbed her keys. She needed to check on something. The drive to her office took 15 minutes, but each second felt like an hour. The streets were empty, streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Her office was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house, sandwiched between a dentist and an insurance agency. As she pulled into the parking lot, something felt wrong. The security light above the back door was dark. Camille sat in her car, studying the building. A loose paper tumbled across the walkway in the night breeze. That wasn't right. They always secured the recycling bins. She reached for her phone, then remembered she'd left it on her study floor. After a deep breath, she got out of her car. The click of her heels on concrete seemed too loud in the quiet night. The back door was ajar. Wood splintered around the lock. Camille's heart pounded, but anger overrode her fear. This was her space, her life's work. She pushed the door open. The destruction hit her like a physical blow. Papers carpeted the floor, many shredded or stomped on. The framed photos of her with past clients, success stories, lives changed, lay shattered. Her desktop computer had been thrown to the floor, the screen a spider web of cracks. But it was the walls that made her stomach lurch. Red spray paint spelled out "Enough" in dripping letters above her desk. Below it, smaller, "Back off or else." Camille forced herself to breathe slowly, to think like a lawyer. She pulled out her phone to document everything, then stopped. She didn't have it. Instead, she carefully picked her way through the mess to her desk, trying not to disturb anything that might hold evidence. Her filing cabinets had been ransacked, folders dumped and scattered. The safe in the corner stood open, emptied of its contents. They'd known the combination. The surveillance cameras were ripped from the walls, their memory cards gone. She heard footsteps in the hallway and tensed, but it was Jordan's voice that called out, "Camille? In here." He appeared in the doorway, phone already raised to take pictures. "I came as soon as I got your message." "Oh my God." "What message?" "The text you sent." He checked his phone, frowned. "It wasn't from you, was it?" "They wanted me to find you here." A chill ran down Camille's spine. They were playing with her, showing their reach. She gestured at the chaos. "Document everything. Then call the police." 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. One was young, seemingly sympathetic as he took notes. The other, older and heavy-set, barely concealed his disdain. "Probably just kids," the older officer said, not even bothering to dust for prints. "We'll file it as vandalism. Kids who knew my safe combination." Camille's voice was ice. "Who specifically targeted case files?" He shrugged. "Lot of people upset about your accusations against Judge Whitaker. Stirring up trouble has consequences." "Is that a threat, officer?" "Just an observation, ma'am." He closed his notebook. "We'll be in touch if we find anything." After they left, Jordan helped Camille begin sorting through the wreckage. "They took everything on the Whitaker case," she said. "All our evidence files." "Not everything." Jordan reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I've been backing everything up off-site since this started. Documents, photos, audio recordings. It's all here." Camille stared at the tiny device. "Jordan, I grew up in the digital age," he said with a small smile. "Never trust just one copy." She sank into her chair, one of the few things not destroyed, and put her head in her hands. The weight of it all crashed down at once. Alicia's death, the break-in, the clear message that they could reach her anywhere. Jordan quietly placed the flash drive on what remained of her desk. It gleamed in the dim light, a small beacon of hope in the devastation. "They're scared," he said softly. "That's why they're doing this. Because we're close." Camille didn't respond. She was thinking of Maya, sleeping peacefully at home, of Alicia's children, who would wake up tomorrow without a mother, of Darnell Green and countless others denied justice by Whitaker and his corrupt system. The office felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in. The red letters on the wall seemed to pulse in the darkness. Enough. But enough of what? Justice? Truth? The audacity of a black woman daring to challenge their power? Her chest felt tight, each breath a struggle. Everything they'd built, everything they'd gathered, scattered across the floor like confetti. And somewhere out there, Whitaker probably sat in his leather chair, smiling that smug smile, believing he'd won. Jordan worked quietly, photographing the damage, while Camille remained motionless in her chair. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance, then faded away. No help coming from that quarter. Not tonight. Not ever. The flash drive sat on her desk, a silent reminder that not all was lost. The gray morning matched Camille's mood as she stood among the mourners at Oak Hill Cemetery. The autumn wind rustled through the trees, scattering leaves across the fresh-turned earth of Alicia Monroe's grave. Maya's warm hand squeezed hers, anchoring her to the present moment. Reverend Thompson's words drifted over the crowd, speaking of justice and peace in the next life. But Camille couldn't stop staring at Alicia's children. Two boys in ill-fitting suits, trying so hard to be brave. Their grandmother held them close, her face a mask of grief and fury. "She was a good person," Maya whispered, her voice catching. "She just wanted to help." Camille pulled her daughter closer, fighting back tears. The official story, suicide by pills, felt like acid in her throat. Alicia had been planning her son's birthday party, had talked about going back to school. People like that don't just give up. After the service, mourners filed past the family, offering condolences. When it was their turn, Alicia's mother grabbed Camille's hand with surprising strength. "They think they can silence us," the older woman said fiercely. "But my baby girl's voice will be heard. You make sure of that." "I will," Camille promised, her chest tight. "Whatever it takes." The boys looked up at her with eyes too old for their faces. She saw in them the same pain she'd witnessed in countless black children failed by the system, but also something else. Hope. They were counting on her. "Don't stop, Mom," Maya whispered again as they walked back to their car. "They can't win." The drive home was silent, heavy with unspoken fears. Camille kept checking her rearview mirror, a habit she'd developed since the office break-in. Every shadow felt like a threat now. That evening, after sending Maya to do homework, Camille drove to her mentor's house in the old part of town. Judge Eleanor Watkins had been one of the first black women on the state court bench, retiring 5 years ago after decades of service. Her Victorian home was a sanctuary of wisdom and strength. Eleanor answered the door in her usual elegant style, pressed slacks, pearl earrings, and a no-nonsense expression that softened when she saw Camille's face. "Come in, child," she said, though Camille was nearly 50. "I've got coffee on." They settled in Eleanor's study, surrounded by law books and framed photos chronicling civil rights victories. Camille cupped her coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. "Not for myself, but Maya. She's all I have." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I remember that fear. When they burned crosses on my lawn in '85, my boys were just little. I sent them to my sisters for a month. Did you ever think about quitting? Every day." Eleanor's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "But that's what they want. Break your spirit. Make you doubt yourself. Make you choose between justice and safety until you convince yourself that backing down is the responsible choice." Camille stared into her coffee. Alicia had children too. And those children need to see that their mother's death meant something, that her courage wasn't wasted. Eleanor leaned forward. "You think you're protecting Maya by stepping back? You're teaching her that evil wins, that bullies and corrupt men can frighten good people into silence. But what if? There will always be what-ifs. When I integrated that courthouse in '72, people said I was selfish, putting my family at risk for pride. But it wasn't pride. It was necessity. Someone had to stand up. Someone had to say, 'Enough.'" The word made Camille flinch, remembering the red letters on her office wall. Eleanor noticed. They use that word because they're afraid. Because people like Whitaker can feel their power slipping. Each generation, we push a little further, climb a little higher. They don't fear you, Camille. They fear what you represent. Hope, change, accountability. I don't feel very hopeful right now. Good. Hope isn't about feeling good. It's about going forward anyway, even when you're terrified, even when they've shown you exactly what they're capable of. Eleanor took Camille's hand. You're not in this alone. The community stands with you. I stand with you. Camille squeezed the older woman's hand, drawing strength from her certainty. They talked for another hour, Eleanor sharing war stories from her own battles against systemic racism, offering practical advice about security measures and legal strategies. When Camille got home, she found Maya asleep on the couch, law books spread around her. She'd been helping research similar cases, wanting to understand the fight. Her daughter's face was peaceful in sleep, innocent, everything Camille wanted to protect. But Eleanor was right. Protection meant more than just physical safety. It meant fighting for a world where Maya wouldn't face the same battles, where justice wasn't determined by skin color or connections. Camille covered her daughter with a blanket, then went to her home office. The flash drive Jordan had saved sat on her desk, containing all their evidence against Whitaker. She plugged it in, opened the files, and began to read. They thought they could scare her into silence, but they'd underestimated her, just like they'd underestimated every black woman who'd fought this fight before. For Maya, for Alicia's boys, for every child who deserved better. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, determined. She would not quit. She would not back down. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through Camille's office blinds. She'd been there since dawn, reviewing files and making notes, her coffee growing cold beside her. A knock at the door made her pause. Standing in the doorway was a tall black man in a crisp suit, his government ID badge catching the light. "Ms. Rhodes, I'm Marcus Hill, FBI Civil Rights Division." His voice was deep and measured. "May I come in?" Camille gestured to the chair across from her desk, studying him carefully. She'd learned to be wary of unexpected visitors. "I've been following your case against Judge Whitaker," Marcus said, settling into the chair. "Actually, I've been following Whitaker himself for the past 3 years." Camille leaned back, keeping her expression neutral. 3 years? That's interesting timing." Marcus pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. It started with a different case, police brutality complaint in Jefferson County. Evidence vanished. Witnesses changed their stories. Judge dismissed everything. He paused. "Sound familiar?" "Too familiar." Camille's fingers drummed on her desk. "Why are you here now?" "Because you've done something no one else has managed. You've got Whitaker scared." Marcus opened the folder, spreading out documents. "And a scared man makes mistakes." Camille leaned forward, scanning the papers. Bank statements, property records, transcripts of phone calls. Her eyes widened at a series of transfers from a shell company to an offshore account. "The police union's been paying him through cutouts," Marcus explained. "Every time he throws out a case against one of their officers, money moves. We've tracked 15 separate payments over 3 years." "Jesus," Camille breathed, picking up a document. "These amounts, $500,000 total. But that's just what we can prove so far." Marcus pulled out more papers. "There's more. Remember the Williams case last year? Young man beaten during a traffic stop?" Camille nodded. "Another dismissal for lack of evidence. Look at this." He handed her a transcript. "Phone call between Whitaker and the union president the night before the ruling. They don't say anything explicit, but they don't have to." Camille read quickly, her jaw tightening. "The timing of these payments lines up perfectly with his pattern of dismissals." Marcus sat back. "We've been building this case slowly, carefully. But when you started pushing, when you found that dash cam footage, you accelerated everything. Camille thought of Alicia, of her broken office, of Maya's worried face. Is that why you waited until now? You let me take all the heat while you built your case? Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. I understand your anger, but we needed to be sure. Federal cases against judges, they have to be airtight. One mistake and the whole thing falls apart. Meanwhile, people died. Camille's voice was sharp. Alicia Monroe was murdered, Marcus finished. We know. We're investigating that too. But we need your help. Camille stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. People hurrying to work, kids heading to school. Her community, carrying on despite everything. What kind of help? Your evidence, combined with ours, makes the pattern clear. But we need someone who knows the local landscape. Someone the community trusts. Marcus stood too. You've got connections we don't. People who'll talk to you, but would never talk to a Fed. She turned to face him. And what do I get? Federal resources, protection for you and your daughter, and... He smiled slightly. The satisfaction of watching Whitaker's whole corrupt world come crashing down. Camille walked back to her desk, running her fingers over the documents. Years of injustice laid out in black and white. Every dismissal, every buried case, every time Whitaker had helped racist cops walk free, it was all here. The dashcam footage you found, Marcus continued, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We've uncovered similar evidence in at least 6 other cases. But we need someone who can put it all together. Someone who can tell this story in a way that resonates. You mean someone black, Camille said bluntly. Marcus nodded. Yes. Someone who understands what these cases really mean to the community. Someone who's lived it. Camille picked up a photo from one of the case files. Another young black man, beaten by police, denied justice by Whitaker. She thought of Darnell Green, of Alicia's boys, of Maya. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it my way. No more waiting in the shadows. No more letting innocent people take the fall while we build a case. Agreed. Marcus pulled out a card. My direct line. Day or night. And my daughter will have round-the-clock protection, already arranged. He met her eyes. We protect our own, Ms. Rhodes. Camille studied him for a long moment, seeing the same fire she felt. The same determination to see justice done. Here was someone else who understood the weight of this fight, who knew what it meant to carry the hopes of a community. She extended her hand. Call me Camille. Marcus shook it firmly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were in this together now, the attorney and the federal investigator united against a common enemy. Let's bring him down, Marcus said simply. Their handshake sealed more than a partnership. It was a promise to their community, to every victim of Whitaker's corruption, to everyone who'd ever been told that justice wasn't for them. Finally, Camille had an ally inside the system, someone with the power and resources to help her finish what she'd started. The next few days blurred into a rhythm of intense work and determination. Camille's office became command central, with boxes of files stacked against walls and evidence boards covering every surface. The air hummed with purpose as she, Marcus, and Jordan pieced together years of corruption. Look at this pattern, Jordan said, late one night, spreading bank statements across Camille's desk. Dark circles ringed his eyes, but his voice was excited. Every time Whitaker dismissed a police brutality case, there's a deposit 2 days later. Like clockwork. Marcus leaned over, nodding. Good catch. And the amounts increased over time. He got greedy. Camille studied the timeline they'd created on the wall. Red strings connected photos of victims to court dates, bank transfers, and phone records. He thought he was untouchable. These phone logs are damning, Jordan added, tapping his laptop screen. Whitaker called the police union president before every major ruling. Sometimes, multiple times. The work was meticulous and exhausting. They cross-referenced hundreds of documents, verified witness statements, and built a database of every case Whitaker had touched. Marcus's federal resources proved invaluable, giving them access to records that would have taken months to obtain otherwise. "We need to be thorough," Marcus reminded them one evening when Jordan suggested taking a shortcut. "Defense attorneys will try to poke holes in everything." Camille agreed, though the pace sometimes frustrated her. Every detail matters. One mistake, and Whitaker walks. Outside their bubble of focused work, Renee Carter kept the pressure on. She organized weekly marches that grew larger each time, drawing hundreds of supporters. Their chants echoed through downtown, "No more cover-ups," and "Justice for Alicia." One afternoon, Renee burst into the office, her energy filling the room. "Y'all need to see this." She held up her phone, showing a viral video of protesters surrounding the courthouse. "We've got people coming from 3 states away now." "The public pressure's helping," Marcus admitted. "Makes it harder for Whitaker's allies to interfere." Camille watched the footage, noting how many young faces were in the crowd. "They're not backing down this time." Jordan printed another stack of documents, adding them to their growing file. "These petitions have over 50,000 signatures now. City Council's getting nervous." The work took its toll. Camille caught herself falling asleep at her desk more than once. Jordan's usual jokes became less frequent. Even Marcus's steady demeanor showed cracks of fatigue. But they pressed on. Each new piece of evidence strengthened their case. They uncovered more victims of Whitaker's corruption, more families denied justice, more officers protected despite clear misconduct. "Each of these cases," Camille said one night, touching a victim's photo, "represents a family still waiting for answers." The federal civil rights lawsuit took shape, slowly but surely. They crafted it carefully, building layer upon layer of evidence. Marcus's experience proved crucial in framing the legal arguments. "We're not just proving individual acts of corruption," he explained. "We're showing a pattern, a systematic abuse of power that violated constitutional rights." Jordan organized their evidence into clear, compelling exhibits. "The timeline makes it impossible to ignore," he said, proud of his work. "Anyone can follow the money." Renee's organizing efforts continued to build momentum. She coordinated with other activists, arranged media coverage, and kept the community engaged. Her social media updates drew national attention. "People need to see this isn't just about one judge or one case," she told them during a strategy meeting. "It's about decades of injustice." The pressure began to show results. Local officials who had defended Whitaker started distancing themselves. The police union grew quieter. Even some of Whitaker's longtime supporters began hedging their positions. One evening, after another long day of preparation, Camille stood at her office window. Outside, a crowd had gathered for a candlelight vigil in Alicia's memory. The soft glow of hundreds of candles illuminated the darkening street. Jordan appeared beside her, holding fresh coffee. "They've been out there for hours." "I keep thinking about Alicia," Camille said softly. "How scared she must have been. But she came forward anyway." The flickering lights below cast moving shadows on the office walls. Each flame represented someone who refused to let this injustice stand. Someone who believed in the possibility of change. "She believed in what we're doing," Marcus added from his spot at the evidence table. "They all do." Camille pressed her hand against the cool glass, watching mothers holding their children, elderly couples supporting each other, young activists with signs bearing Alicia's name. "Look at them," Renee said, joining them at the window. "Every single person down there has a story about police brutality or judicial corruption. They're not just mourning. They're demanding change. The sight moved something deep in Camille's chest. This was why they worked these long hours, why they pored over documents until their eyes burned, why they refused to back down despite the threats and pressure. She thought of Alicia's courage, of her determination to expose the truth no matter the cost. The whistleblower's face was clear in her mind, nervous but resolute, choosing to stand for justice despite her fear. Camille's breath fogged the window slightly as she whispered, "This is for you." The federal courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its stone columns casting long shadows across the gathering crowd. Camille stood at the base of the steps, taking slow, measured breaths. Maya hugged her tightly before joining Renee in the growing line of supporters. Inside, Camille walked the familiar path to the courtroom, her heels clicking against marble floors. Jordan matched her pace, carrying boxes of exhibits they'd organized meticulously over the past weeks. "Ready?" he asked, shifting the weight of the evidence. "More than ready," Camille replied, her voice steady. The courtroom doors opened to reveal a packed gallery. Community members filled every bench, their faces a mix of hope and determination. Reporters lined the back wall, notebooks and tablets ready. Marcus sat at their table, reviewing last-minute details. Whitaker's entrance drew murmurs from the crowd. He strode in with an entourage of expensive suits, 3 defense attorneys carrying leather briefcases. His familiar smug smile played across his face as he took his seat, barely glancing at the gallery full of people whose lives he'd impacted. Federal Judge Patricia Martinez called the court to order. Her reputation for fairness had given Camille hope when they'd drawn her for the case. The judge's dark eyes scanned the room, settling briefly on each party. "Ms. Rhodes," Judge Martinez said, "you may begin your opening statement." Camille rose slowly, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. She moved to the center of the courtroom, taking in the faces before her. The community members who'd stood with her, Maya's encouraging smile, Darnell Green and his mother in the front row. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong, "this case is about more than corruption. It's about trust. Trust between citizens and the courts. Trust that justice will be blind, not bought." She gestured toward Whitaker. For years, Judge Harold Whitaker has betrayed that trust. He has systematically protected violent officers, buried evidence, and profited from the pain of our community. Whitaker's smirk didn't waver, but one of his attorneys shifted uncomfortably. "We will prove through bank records, altered court documents, and testimony that Judge Whitaker didn't just make bad decisions. He sold justice to the highest bidder. He turned his courtroom into a marketplace where constitutional rights meant nothing, and police brutality had a price tag." Camille walked slowly past the jury box. "You'll see evidence of regular payments, from police union funds to offshore accounts. You'll see transcripts altered in Judge Whitaker's own handwriting. You'll hear from federal investigators who've tracked this pattern of corruption for years." She turned to face Whitaker directly. "This is not about one case or one judge's discretion. This is about systematic abuse of power that has destroyed lives, protected violent officers, and undermined the very foundation of our justice system." The gallery remained silent, but the energy in the room was electric. Even the reporters had stopped typing, caught up in her words. "By the end of this hearing, the evidence will show that Judge Harold Whitaker is not fit to serve, that he has violated his oath, betrayed public trust, and used his position to profit from injustice." Camille returned to her table. "Thank you, Your Honor." Marcus passed her their first exhibit as Whitaker's lead attorney finished his opening statement. A weak attempt to paint the case as a witch hunt against a respected judge. Judge Martinez nodded to Camille. "Call your first witness." The plaintiffs call Marcus Hill. Marcus took the stand, his FBI credentials establishing immediate credibility. Through his testimony, Camille methodically introduced their evidence. Bank statements appeared on the courtroom screens, showing regular deposits to Whitaker's accounts following dismissed police misconduct cases. "And these transfers?" Camille asked, highlighting specific dates. "They correspond with which cases?" Marcus pointed out the pattern. Each deposit came within 48 hours of Judge Whitaker dismissing charges against officers accused of excessive force or misconduct. The jury leaned forward as Marcus explained their investigation. Whitaker's attorneys objected frequently, but Judge Martinez overruled them as Camille established the foundation for each piece of evidence. Next came the altered transcripts. Camille displayed them side by side, the originals and Whitaker's modified versions. "Can you explain these discrepancies?" "These sections," Marcus indicated, "were changed to omit officer statements that would have supported brutality claims. Judge Whitaker personally edited these transcripts before sealing them." In the gallery, people who'd had cases before Whitaker shook their heads in recognition. Some wiped away tears as their suspicions were finally confirmed. Whitaker's confidence began showing cracks. His leg bounced under the defense table. His attorneys whispered urgently, passing notes back and forth. Camille introduced surveillance photos showing meetings between Whitaker and police union officials before crucial rulings. Phone records documented calls that aligned perfectly with their timeline of corruption. As the morning wore on, the evidence mounted. Each new exhibit added another layer to their case, another proof of Whitaker's betrayal of his office. During a brief recess, Jordan squeezed Camille's shoulder. "You've got him on the ropes." She nodded, watching Whitaker in heated discussion with his lawyers. His usual smugness had given way to visible anxiety. When court resumed, Judge Martinez looked directly at Whitaker. Her voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "Judge Whitaker, please take the stand." The gallery hushed. Whitaker's lead attorney stood to object, but Whitaker waved him down. He straightened his tie and walked to the witness box, trying to project his usual confidence. But as he raised his right hand to be sworn in, Camille saw it, the slight tremor in his fingers, the tightness around his eyes. For the first time since she'd known him, Judge Harold Whitaker looked afraid. Camille approached the witness stand, maintaining steady eye contact with Whitaker. The courtroom fell silent, every person leaning forward in anticipation. "Judge Whitaker, can you explain these deposits to your Cayman Islands account?" She placed the bank statements on the display screen. "Investments," he said curtly. Nothing improper about a judge having investments. "Interesting timing for these investments." Camille pointed to specific dates. "Each one corresponds exactly to cases where you dismissed charges against Officers Matthews and Briggs. Can you explain that coincidence?" Whitaker shifted in his seat. "I make many financial decisions. I don't track the timing of every transaction." "Let's be more specific." Camille pulled up another document. "On March 15th, you received $50,000 from an account linked to the police union. That same morning, you threw out key evidence in the Thompson brutality case. Remember that one?" "I made my ruling based on the law," Whitaker snapped, color rising in his face. "The law?" Camille's voice stayed measured. "Like these transcript alterations in your handwriting?" She displayed the side-by-side comparison. "Is it legal to modify court records, Your Honor?" Sweat beaded on Whitaker's forehead. "Those are clerical corrections. Standard procedure. Removing entire witness statements about police violence is standard procedure?" Camille raised an eyebrow. Interesting definition of clerical. In the gallery, people who'd lost cases in Whitaker's court watched with growing anger as their suspicions were confirmed. Maya squeezed Renee's hand, both of them watching Camille methodically break down the corrupt judge's defenses. "Let's discuss Alicia Monroe." Camille's voice hardened slightly. Whitaker's attorney jumped up. Objection. Speculation about an unrelated death goes to pattern and practice, Camille countered. And I have evidence linking the defendant to surveillance of Ms. Monroe before her death. Judge Martinez considered, then nodded. Overruled. Proceed carefully, Ms. Rhodes. Camille produced photos showing Whitaker meeting with Officer Briggs the day before Alicia's death. Can you explain this meeting? I don't recall, Whitaker said, his voice smaller than before. You don't recall meeting with an officer involved in multiple misconduct cases just hours before your clerk, who was cooperating with a federal investigation, was found dead? Whitaker's face had gone pale. He looked to his attorneys, who seemed at a loss. Let me refresh your memory. Camille played a surveillance video showing Whitaker and Briggs in heated discussion. That's you, isn't it? Pointing at a photo of Alicia Monroe? The gallery gasped. Whitaker's hands gripped the witness stand. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Now you care about rights? Camille's voice carried just enough edge. What about Darnell Green's rights? What about every person who came to your courtroom expecting justice, only to find it was for sale? Objection! Whitaker's attorney shouted. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Ms. Rhodes, please stick to questions. Camille nodded, then displayed more financial records. These accounts show regular payments from shell companies tied to the police union. Did you report these on your judicial disclosure forms? There were oversights in my paperwork. Whitaker's arrogance had crumbled completely. Oversights? Like accidentally taking bribes? Like deliberately hiding evidence? Like protecting violent officers for profit? Whitaker's attorney stood again. Your Honor, this is badgering. It's the truth, Camille responded. And I have documentation for every single accusation. Judge Martinez studied Whitaker's face. Overruled. The witness will answer. Whitaker seemed to deflate. I did what was necessary to maintain order. These communities need strong policing. These communities need justice, Camille interrupted. Not corruption, masquerading as law and order. She walked to her table and lifted a final document. One last exhibit, Your Honor. Federal investigators found this in the judge's private safe. She displayed a ledger, a detailed record of payments received, cases fixed, and officers protected. In your own handwriting, Judge Whitaker. Care to explain that? The courtroom erupted in whispers. Whitaker's face had gone ash-gray. His attorneys huddled in panicked discussion. 2 FBI agents entered the courtroom quietly, standing near the doors. Marcus nodded to them, then passed a note to Camille. No further questions, she said, returning to her seat. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the tension. In light of the evidence presented, I am referring this matter for immediate criminal prosecution. Judge Whitaker, please surrender yourself to federal custody. The agents moved forward as Whitaker stood shakily. This is a mistake. I've served this community for decades. You've served yourself, Judge Martinez corrected. At the expense of justice, she turned to address Officers Matthews and Briggs. You two are also remanded to custody, facing charges of civil rights violations, assault, and conspiracy. The gallery erupted in applause and tears as handcuffs clicked around Whitaker's wrists. His carefully constructed world of power and corruption crumbled in real time. Maya rushed forward to hug her mother. Camille held her daughter tight, watching as Whitaker was led away. His face was ashen, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Darnell Green and his mother embraced nearby, finally seeing justice for their ordeal. Community members who'd suffered under Whitaker's corrupt rulings wiped away tears of relief. The racist judge who had terrorized their community with his bias and greed was finally facing consequences. As he shuffled toward the door in handcuffs, Whitaker glanced back once at Camille. She stood tall, her daughter at her side, unwavering in the face of his hateful glare. 3 weeks after Whitaker's dramatic fall from power, Camille stood at the back of the packed community center, watching people file in for the town hall meeting. The walls were adorned with vibrant murals, faces of those who'd suffered under the corrupt system, with Alicia Munro's portrait commanding central attention. The artist had captured her gentle smile and determined eyes perfectly. "Ms. Rhodes?" A young boy tugged at her sleeve. "My mom says you're a hero." Camille knelt down to his level. "The real heroes are the people who stood up and told their stories. People like your mom, who never stopped fighting for what's right." The boy's mother, whom Camille recognized from the courthouse protests, smiled warmly. "But you gave us a voice when no one would listen." The community center buzzed with energy as more people arrived. Renee Carter directed volunteers setting up extra chairs. Jordan Price, Camille's devoted paralegal, arranged stacks of documents outlining the new reforms. Maya helped distribute water bottles, beaming with pride every time someone praised her mother. Marcus Hill, the federal investigator who'd become a trusted ally, stood near the podium reviewing his notes. He caught Camille's eye and nodded, a simple gesture that carried the weight of their shared victory. At 7 o'clock sharp, Reverend Thompson, whose son had been one of Whitaker's victims, called the meeting to order. "We gather tonight not just to celebrate justice served, but to ensure it remains served." The crowd settled into their seats. Children sat cross-legged in the aisles, parents balanced babies on their laps, and elderly community members who'd witnessed decades of injustice leaned forward attentively. Marcus stepped up first, outlining the federal investigation's findings. "Judge Whitaker's corruption went back 15 years. We've identified 37 cases where he deliberately protected violent officers in exchange for payments." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus continued, "Officers Matthews and Briggs were part of a larger network. Thanks to Ms. Rhodes's work, we've suspended 12 other officers pending investigation." Renee took the podium next, her voice strong with emotion. "The City Council has approved our demands for independent oversight. Every complaint against an officer will now be reviewed by a civilian board. No more internal investigations that go nowhere." Applause erupted. Someone shouted, "Thank you, Camille." Others joined in until the room thundered with appreciation. Camille raised her hands, shaking her head. "Please," she said, as she approached the podium, "this victory belongs to all of us, to every person who marched, every witness who came forward, every family who refused to be silent." She gripped the podium, scanning the familiar faces. Alicia Munro gave her life exposing the truth. Darnell Green showed incredible courage telling his story. Countless others risked everything to stand up against injustice. Her voice softened. "I'm just a lawyer who had the privilege of fighting alongside you. The real change comes from communities like this one, refusing to accept corruption as normal." Maya watched from the front row, her eyes shining. Camille continued, "Whitaker's resignation letter was released today. He'll never sit on another bench. The officers he protected are facing federal charges. But our work isn't done." She held up a thick document. "This is the new oversight legislation. It requires body cameras to be active at all times during police interactions. It establishes clear consequences for misconduct. It gives this community a real voice in law enforcement." Jordan distributed copies as Camille explained key points. People studied the pages intently, asking thoughtful questions. This wasn't just celebration. It was education, empowerment. A woman stood up, her voice trembling. "My son was beaten by Matthews 5 years ago. Whitaker threw out our case in 10 minutes. Can these old cases be reopened?" "Yes," Marcus answered. We're reviewing every case where Whitaker showed clear bias. The new district attorney has promised full cooperation. More hands raised. More stories shared. The pain was still raw, but now tinged with hope. Camille listened to each person, taking notes, ensuring no voice went unheard. As the meeting wound down, people lingered to talk. Children drew on the walls beneath Alicia's mural, adding their own colorful visions of justice. Elderly activists who'd marched in the 60s embraced young organizers, passing the torch of resistance. Renee brought out a cake decorated with the words "Justice Prevails." Someone started singing, "We Shall Overcome." Others joined in, the familiar melody carrying decades of struggle and triumph. Maya helped serve cake, then joined her mother near the mural of Alicia. "Do you think she knows," she asked softly, "that she helped change everything?" Camille wrapped an arm around her daughter. "I believe she knows, and I believe she'd be proud of how this community came together." They stayed until the last person left, helping stack chairs and collect papers. The setting sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the murals. Outside, the summer evening wrapped them in warm air and cicada songs. Maya linked her arm through her mother's as they walked toward the courthouse. The building looked different now, less imposing, its shadows less threatening. Groups of people still milled about on the courthouse steps, some taking photos with signs reading, "Justice Served" and "Power to the People." They waved to Camille, calling out thanks and blessings. A young woman approached with her baby. "My brother was one of Whitaker's victims," she said. "He's getting out next month because of you. His case is being reversed." "Because of us," Camille corrected gently, touching the baby's hand. "All of us together." The woman hugged her, then hurried to join her family. Camille and Maya continued their walk, their shadows stretching long in the golden light. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.